Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlegs, shills, deslights, serfs, peasants, vassals, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot, and last week I did a video pointing out the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu has been warning about Iran's nuclear program for 20 years. But I don't mean to necessarily single out Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu, because as it turns out, the United States has been warning about Iran's nuclear program for 30 years. And of course, the U.S. has a lot of reason to be concerned about a Iranian nuclear program, because when the pro-Western Shah was in power back in the 70s, the U.S., France, and West Germany all went in on a nuclear spending spree for Iran and built 20 nuclear reactors. And by the late 70s, it started filtering out that the Shah had built up a clandestine nuclear weapons program. And so the U.S. was already concerned about what was happening there. But we were the country that was supplying him with enriched uranium. So, of course, when the Shah was ousted in 1979 in the Iranian Revolution, that's when the enriched uranium stopped being supplied to Iran from the United States. And in fact, the Ayatollah declared an end to all the nuclear programs in Iran. And then it didn't take more than a few years, 1984, for West German intelligence to say that Iran was in the final stages of developing nuclear weapons. So mind you, that's well over 30 years ago. And they said they were in the final stages. That didn't happen. And then the same year, U.S. Senator Alan Cranston claimed that Iran was 7 years away from a nuclear bomb, which would have been about 1991. Of course, that didn't happen. And then along with Netanyahu, we had a 1992 House Republican Research Committee that claimed that there was a 98% certainty that Iran already had all of the components required for 2 or 3 operational nuclear weapons. That was 1992, 20 years ago. That didn't happen. CIA Chief Robert Gates the same year suggested Iran's nuclear program could be a serious problem in 5 years or less. So once again, a prediction of 5 years from then would be 1997. Well, that didn't happen either. Then in 1995, the New York Times article conveyed the fear of U.S. and Israeli officials that, quote, Iran is much closer to producing nuclear weapons than previously thought, unquote, about 5 years away. So that would have been the year 2000. That was 12 years ago. That didn't happen. And then we have the New York Times also saying that Iran's nuclear bomb is on the list of dangers in the coming decade. And the report speaks of a, quote, acceleration of the Iranian nuclear program. Doesn't that sound familiar? And claim that Iran, quote, began an intensive campaign to develop and acquire nuclear weapons in 1987, recruiting scientists from Pakistan and the Soviet Union, unquote. So that was 1996. So that didn't happen. Then in 1997, the Christian Science Monitor reported that U.S. pressure on Iran's nuclear suppliers had forced Iran to adjust its suspected timetable for a bomb. And, of course, that was 15 years ago, so they put it off by quite a considerable margin, as it turns out. Then in 1998, the New York Times said Israel is less safe as Iran launches a medium-range missile. And, of course, I'm not sure why Israel would have been scared, because Israel already had long-range missiles and nuclear weapons in 1998. An expert was quoted as saying, quote, this test shows Iran is bent on acquiring nuclear weapons because no one builds an 800-mile missile to deliver conventional warheads, which of course is not true. And then in 1998, as I brought up in the other video, Donald Rumsfeld warned that Congress that Iran could have intercontinental ballistic missiles within 5 years. Of course, that didn't happen. And then in 2002, we had CIA warnings of nuclear-tipped missiles from Iran, and they even compared them to being on the same level with North Korea. Well, anybody that's watched these launches of North Korean missiles and all the failures they've had shouldn't be too nervous about Iran getting North Korean missile technology. So then in 2002, of course, we had the famous George W. Bush declaring Iran as part of the axis of evil along with Iraq and North Korea, which was rather surprising considering they cooperated relatively well after the 9/11 attack. So what a surprise to Iran to be included on that list. And here's a completely interesting fact. In 2002, the Iranian underground opposition group claimed Iran was building an underground uranium enrichment facility as well as a heavy water reactor. And all of these are legal under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, to which Iran subscribes. But more importantly, it's just like in Iraq. We have Iraqi underground opposition groups claiming Saddam had weapons of mass destruction and using that for justification for a war. So here we have Iranian underground groups probably claiming the same thing and supplying us with false information in order to garner support for their opposition, their underground movement in Iran. Then in 2004, we had Colin Powell give another one of his misguided presentations about nuclear warhead technology that Iran was seeking. And that, once again, was 8 years ago and nothing's happened. Then in 2005, we had thousands of forged Iranian nuclear papers that supposedly came from a laptop. And that was another attempt to incriminate Iran and indicate that they had a nuclear weapons program that was not happening. And then in 2007, we had Bush and Cheney giving all the warnings about Iran. And even though all along we've had reports that back and forth that Iran is on the verge of having nuclear weapons, and then other reports that say they haven't been developing them, they've abandoned them, or they never developed them at all. And then, of course, one of the worst ones was in June 2008 when John Bolton, then ambassador to the UN, predicted Israel would attack Iran before the January 2009 presidential election, taking advantage of the window. That sounds strangely familiar as well. So anyway, there we have a roundup of the United States has also been rattling their sword and making claims that Iran either had nuclear weapons or would have them soon. We've been making those claims for 30 years, and it still hasn't happened. So we have a flawed foreign policy coming from Israel. We have a flawed foreign policy coming from the United States. And how seriously could we take these warnings from our government, these warnings from these so-called experts, when there's so much contrary information, and we've had 30 years of saber rattling and warmongering? I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.